everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 8 of Psychopaths, the extended edition. And does this count as a rule of 8? I don't know if it does. I guess not, because it's technically episodes 15 and 16, so I guess we're not going to count it as episode, the rule of 8. But in any case, maybe, I mean, there's no precedent for this, so who knows? But in any case, I talked to everybody in the Discord last week when I was recording extended edition of episode 7. I had a migraine start like towards the end of the discussion, and usually I try to record when I know I feel really good, because sometimes migraines just pop up and I'm like, and I feel terrible. But I thought I was good, and then as I was doing the discussion, it started to come on, and I was like, and I try not to show it in the reactions, but I did kind of end that reaction a little earlier than I might have normally. So I just want to let you know that that's why maybe the discussion, it was still like an hour-long discussion, but that's why it was a little bit shorter than it normally is, because I just wasn't feeling very good. But I feel good today, so that's good. But yeah, so we're going to talk about a few comments, and one of the comments that led me to do a little bit of research before we dive into episode 8 here. Yeah, there are these helmets now that are copying the psychopath's hue of people near them that is the lowest, and using it instead, and allows these people to commit crimes, and it's going to cause a muck, and that seems to be Shogo's goal. Shogo wants to cause mass chaos and break the system down from within. And meanwhile, our inspectors and enforcers are like, well, what can we do? How do we solve the crime? And that's where we're at, right? And Akane may or may not. I think that she has the same ability as Shogo does, and I think her crime coefficient isn't affected. I think she's able to control her hue and keep it clear like Shogo does. So that's fascinating to me. But I've got a couple comments. We talked in episode 6 of the extended edition of Psychopaths about how Rena's band was being used for like anti-political statements. And there are people traveling with mail all the time right now for the holiday season, and my dogs are going crazy. So if they act up and act a fool, that's why, and I apologize ahead of time. But Rena's band was making anti-political statements, and we talked about it in the episode, and I kind of made light of it, and so I do apologize, because Cisco Kid had a really cool comment on YouTube saying that their own government in Mexico in the 60s, 70s, and 80s also targeted a lot of anti-political movements with bans. And that got me thinking about, oh, well, I read a few years ago about Russia, and during there's like feminist rights, there was a lot of bands that were getting targeted because they were making political statements with their music. So it seems like in nearly every country there have been bands that have made political statements that have been targeted by their governments for doing so. So I do think that through line with Kunazuka makes a lot of sense. It's a neat storyline to follow, and I really like it. So thank you, Cisco Kid, for bringing that up. K.A. points out that Sasayama's voice actor is not only the same voice actor as Masaki from Tsurune, which is cool, but also Ugetsu from Given, and what a range. I'm like, Ugetsu and Masaki are both like kind of soft-spoken, quieter, mysterious characters, but Sasayama's a big old jerk. I'm like, but Sasayama, you know, him and Kodami are kind of together in a situation, and you have Akihiko and Given, who Ugetsu has kind of has a crush on, so maybe it all works out. But I thought that was interesting to know. Anime Annie had a correction that it's not AB blood types that are the universal donors, it's O negative. So if you were out there banking that your AB blood type was going to be a universal donor, correction, it's O negative. And finally, RGRYT7225 had a comment about the death penalty in Japan. And full transparency, I knew nothing about the death penalty in Japan. I was like, oh, I don't know what this is. Because here in the United States, the states that do have the death penalty still, it's lethal injection. And so I was like, what is this? So I did some research because they were making some comments, and I found this one article that's really fascinating. It's from Nippon.com, and it's by Sakamoto Toshio back in April of 2023. And it's talking about how there is a push to abolish the death penalty in Japan right now, not because of the treatment of the prisoners who are being executed, but rather because of the mental strain on the people supervising them. And I was like, oh. So RG talks a little bit about this in their comment from episode 6, but I wanted to bring this article up because apparently in Japan, most death row inmates are only there for a maximum of 6 months before they're executed, which is not long, especially compared to the US, not long at all. Although there have been some that through appeals in the legal system have ended up there longer. So what's interesting is that the officers that oversee them are under a lot of mental strain. There was there was a prisoner named Kato who was sentenced to death in 2011, and their sentence was upheld on appeal in 2015, and they weren't executed until 2022. So that's a long time. That's 11 years that they were still in prison. And during this time, they had forged this relationship with the officers supervising them. The officer supervising them brings them food, helps them to conduct physical inspections each day of themselves. They converse with the inmates. They have physical contact. They help change their clothing. There's all this intimate relationship with the prisoners. And normally the prisoner's only there for 6 months, so it's not as big of a deal. But these officers had developed an 11-year relationship with this prisoner. And so what happens in a Japanese execution for the death penalty is that they're taken to a room where they're hung, and the 3 officers that preside over them all press a button at the same time, and there's a release. But the reason they press the buttons at the same time is to help alleviate guilt, to see who was the person that actually caused the death. Which, compared with psychopaths, psychologically, that's pretty messed up. That you're like, okay, well, we'll have them all press the buttons at the same time, so none of them will think that it's them that killed them. But there's a 1 in 3 chance, right? But here's what got me, was that the correction officers on the security force, they're not just involved in the actual execution of the death penalty. They have these other assignments, and the article listed these as follow. They accompany the inmate from the isolation cell to where they're executed. They act as a witness when the order is communicated. They place handcuffs on the inmate, tying a white cloth bag over his or her head, bringing the inmate to the gallows platform and placing the noose around their neck. After the execution has been carried out, they remove the noose. They wash the corpse after inspection. They dress the corpse in garments appropriate to the deceased's religion, and they place the corpse in the coffin. Then they accompany the prison chaplain and the counselor during the wake and the funeral. They place the coffin into the hearse, and they salute and see off the deceased in formation when the coffin leaves the prison premises. That's a lot. That is more than some family members have involvement with their loved ones' bereavement and burial. That is insane. So they have more interaction with a person that's executed on their watch with their own hand than most family members get contact with family members that pass. That blew my mind. I was like, oh. So then they also have to inform the inmates that they are about to die. It says the law stipulates the death penalty is to be executed in a manner that is not open to the public, and utmost secrecy is to be maintained. Currently, inmates are brought to the prison chaplain's room, which is adjacent to the execution room, 1 hour before the time the sentence is to be carried out. And the warden or representative of the warden communicates the order to carry out the execution after the identity of the inmate has been confirmed. That is crazy. And it says this procedure was different until around half a century ago. It's crazy. So yeah, they're talking about in the article that they're wanting to try and abolish the death penalty because of what it's doing. So it's interesting. They also had a really interesting point here about capital punishment inducing murder. It says only approximately 1% of criminals convicted of murder and similar crimes are subject to the death penalty and actually ultimately have the death penalty imposed, in spite of the fact that 99% of the victims' families want the strictest possible sentence to be imposed. Generally, this is a prison sentence rather than an execution. This is because judges are restricted by extremely rigorous conditions under which they can pass a sentence of death. These conditions include the number of people killed, as well as the circumstances surrounding the crime. As these conditions are widely known, some people intentionally commit random mass killings precisely because they want to receive the death penalty. Instead of preventing crime, in fact, the death penalty induces some people to commit mass murder, which is so fascinating comparing to this series, right? The results of public opinion polls and the feelings of victims' family members, compiled as part of an ongoing debate whether to abolish the death penalty, led to the conclusion that it should be maintained. However, this result is in conflict with reality, according to this article. Many of those serving prison sentences for murder become contrite and repentant while in prison, and there are stories indicating that many of those inmates want to pay the victims' families compensation out of the earnings they receive for their prison labor. The opinion poll on the death penalty is conducted by the Cabinet Office every 5 years and has found in each of the 4 polls conducted since 2004, 80% of the public say they think the death penalty is necessary. But the public could discuss the death penalty in context of whether it's preventative on the violent crime based on the current facts available. So the article itself wants the death penalty to be abolished, but apparently the majority of opinion in Japan is that it should be maintained, which is interesting. And it's been pretty consistent from 1994 all the way through 2019, according to this poll, which is fascinating to me. That there's it shows 80% believe that the death penalty should be maintained. About 10% say that it should be abolished, and the other 10% are not sure. It's just very crazy. I have a very staunch opinion about the death penalty, but I hadn't thought about how it affected the people. I didn't realize the people involved in the execution did all of those extra things. That would mentally take a toll on your body and your mind if you had to go through that process, especially if it ended up being an inmate that you became acquainted with and you got to know. It's like the Green Mile. It's crazy, right? So yeah, I thought that was very fascinating. So RGRYT, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't know about it. I did a deep dive one afternoon and was like, what is this? So I thought that was fascinating. But in any case, those are my comments. I've talked enough, but I am really excited to dive into episode 8 of the extended edition, get the old rule of 8 going and see if it applies. But this will be episodes 15 and 16 of the regular series. I can't believe we only have 3 extended edition episodes left after this for season 1. I'm glad we're not done with the series, but for season 1, I'm like, what? So we'll just have to see. So in any case, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in and see what we get. So we're going to start Psycho-Pass episode 8 of the extended edition, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. No. No! Kagari, no! You know what the worst part was? We're gonna go back to that scene, but the worst part was when old Robo Grandma aimed her gun at him, it was gonna paralyze him because he had a non-lethal coefficient, and either the gun malfunctioned or she malfunctioned, and it killed him anyway. Ah, damn it. I thought Kagari was going to die this episode, but when he showed up there at show at the end, I'm like, well, maybe he's not going to die. And then when the grandma showed up, I was like, oh my God. Okay, so this episode said, rule of 8 applies. Oh my God. Oh, there were so many twists, so many surprises this set of episodes, but I think the biggest surprise is we're already to Shogo being caught, supposedly. Now, maybe he'll get away next episode. Maybe Akane not killing him is going to let him get away, and that's going to be a problem. I don't know. But, oh my God, because Kogami told her to kill him, and she was like, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. Even after he'd killed her friend, she couldn't kill him. And that's the thing, I know a lot of people will be like, well, why couldn't she do that? And I kind of relate a lot to Akane. I empathize with Akane a lot. I don't know if I could either. It's one of those things this series, it plays with the idea that they're, Shogo is saying, well, once all this happens and once everything goes over, then everybody's going to become a criminal, because if you give them access to violence, they're going to go through with it. And Akane shows us that no, that's not always the case. And yeah, in a lot of times, sure. Yeah, that'll work. But in her case, she's like, I can't do it. And I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm the same way. I'm like, even if somebody was like, put me in that situation, I don't know if I could do it either. And I don't think that's a wrong thing. I think that she chooses to be better than the system. She chooses to basically go against Shogo's goal and Shogo's plan. She chooses to not choose the chaos. And I respect her for it. I'm like, of course, this series may make it blow up in her face, which is going to suck. And it's going to be like, ah. But, oh my God. Just. So what do we do? So what do we do at this point? That's the big question, right? So what do we do? Well, let's go through this and see what happens. But this episode was hard in a lot of ways. Man, was it. It was difficult. And they're like, the moment they learn of the helmet, they say that potential criminals become criminals. Yeah, so it's the idea of Shogo here that what the helmet ends up doing is it doesn't just take ordinary citizens and make them criminals, but it takes those that were thinking about it and are potential criminals, and it gives them that opportunity to do what they want, right? And that's kind of Shogo's thing. He's like, it needs to be a situation where people choose what they want to do, and this random system isn't necessarily stopping them. So people who don't know the taste of honey won't try to steal it. Which is essentially him saying that unless you have committed violence, you won't be drawn to it. You won't be drawn to it. So maybe it's a good thing Akane didn't, do the violent act, right? Maybe it's a good thing Akane did not do the violent act, because otherwise she could very well, if her crime coefficient doesn't go out, she could be the next Shogo Makishima, so we don't want that. I'm so fascinated by Shogo's background. I hope we find out more about him. I'm so curious. But he's like, if you give them a reason, they'll turn into mad dogs. That's what I've always thought. And it looks like that's how things will pan out. Although, I will argue, Kagari and Akane are kind of like the exceptions to the system, as we see in this episode set. But Kagari, I was rooting for him. Damn. And so Shogo says a society that has no place in it for criminals is unhealthy. Basically, he likens the Sybil system to people who have grown up in a perfectly disinfected environment. Basically, he says that your immune system, he basically uses the analogy that your immune system, it needs disease. It needs disease to build up immunity. And that if you have a too clean environment all the time, you're going to get sick a lot easier. Which, in terms of that analogy, yeah, in that scenario, that may be true. But I don't know if I would liken a system with no criminals to that same environment. I'm like, he's making a logical jump there that I'm not sure is the most accurate. And I'm like, but Shogo, oh my God, he says something later that I laughed so hard. I was like, you're such a hypocrite. Because, yeah, we'll talk about it here in a second. But him telling Cho, he reminds me a little bit of Johan from Monster. And if you've not seen that series, you should go watch it. He reminds me a little bit of him in this episode, but much more snobby, which I didn't think I'd ever say that, but much more snobby. And so, but a lot of things that he says to Cho are just feeding in to exactly what Cho wants to hear, right? And he says it was if one day somebody had changed the rules, saying that you could no longer have a civil war without genocide. It's pretty extreme. Saying you could no longer have a civil war without genocide, meaning you couldn't have the small things without the mass things in general, like the worst case scenario. Interesting. And so then we go to, the bus that they're in with the guys. And he's like, oh, I know that book. And what does he say here? It's Project Ito. It's by Project Ito. So what is that? That's the one I wanted to look up. It's a science. Project Ito, real name Satoshi Ito, was a Japanese science fiction writer. There's actually multiple There was actually multiple sci-fi writers that were mentioned in another edition of Kogami's book, or not Kogami, Shogo's Book Club. Shogo's Book Club took a sci-fi route today. So if you wanted to join Shogo's Book Club, we're doing a sci-fi thing. So we have Project Ito. Project Ito, which is a real name Satoshi Ito. Was born in 1974, died in 2009, was a Japanese science fiction writer and essayist. They were born in Tokyo. They wrote Genocidal Organ, and they submitted it to the Komatsu Sakyo Award in 2006, and then it was published in 2007. They also says that he died of cancer in March 2009 at the age of 34, so he was not very old. The video game Metal Gear Solid and afterwards of the last volume of the manga Akisora were dedicated in his memory. Oh, because he had a tie-in novel based on the video game Metal Gear Solid. Interesting. That's such a... It's so weird because a lot of the novelists that we've been looking at in this series are like from the early 20th century. So seeing somebody and seeing the words Metal Gear Solid, I'm like, this is so modern. This feels so up to date, right? And then basically it just talks about their influence and Genocidal Organ that was supposed to be originally published into something else or made into an anime, and then his other works were going to be adapted. So, okay. But that's all we know about Project Ito. We'll go back to the episode. I got more on the other people. Interesting. But Cho knows about it. And I like that Shogo's like, I don't have much to say about that because that's too modern for me. I'm into the posh things. Man, okay, so 7 hours earlier. What's so terrifying about this first part of the episode is how realistically it ties to a lot of our modern day. That's kind of the scary thing about it, because it's talking about spreading misinformation online and how people just read something randomly online and just take it as fact. And it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily true. But then it also talks about it being AI generated. Like at Cho, when Cho was like, oh, I've just got my AI doing it. I'm like, yeah, that's the terrifying thing. Like all Cho has to do is just release this AI robot into the net and into the internet there and say, oh, we'll just keep spreading information. And then we know that AI like evolves and adapts over time. So it'll start to make the stories seem more and more convincing unless you've got a detector for it. So that's absolutely terrifying. And in a moment of crisis and panic, having something in AI generating all these random bot like responses and not being able to tell what's real and what's not is absolutely terrifying and so realistic. And I was like, ooh, this is getting a little close to home in this episode. I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this. But the idea of it going through and people like being scared, and some people being scared and being like, well, what do we do? Like, what is the police going to do? And other people being like, I want one of those helmets. And it's like, it just shows the spectrum of how people respond in this situation. And it's terrifying. But then, yeah, people get the helmets, they're distributed, and then they start wearing them and committing these crimes. And people are like, if we go out, we'll be killed. Well, shouldn't the validation work? So it's like, it's better not to look outside. If they notice you there, you might get killed. So there's this idea of what Shogo's wanting to do as just dismantle the civil system and basically turn things back to the way they were before. The problem is, yeah, that's all well and good, and I do agree from what we've seen in this series so far that there is a justification to not have the civil system, because like in Kagari's case and Kunazuka's case, it's pretty messed up. But you can't just quit cold turkey. Like what they're doing is, and like Kagari kind of notes it, he's like, you're just killing random innocent people that you didn't have to do. Like, no, that doesn't make you a freedom fighter. You're still killing people, and that's wrong. It still makes you a murderer, and it's not right. But it's like this system has been so ingrained in the culture for several decades now that you can't just shut it off and everything be perfectly fine and everybody's free. No, it's going to devolve into chaos for a good long while until it gets sorted out. So yeah, that's not going to work. It's like, you're going to have a big old hot mess until it all gets figured out. And it's like, oh my God, it's terrifying, right? But that's, that's not Shogo. Shogo doesn't care. And I like that, of course, they have like the soda falling to the ground and it's red to illustrate like the blood being spilled. And then everybody having all of these like random weapons and stuff. And the thing that's so creepy about it is that people don't have anything to defend themselves in their home because they haven't thought they needed anything. So they're like on the internet being like, well, what do we do? Like, we'll put something heavy in a sock or use a house plant or do something to like defend yourself. Like, that's terrifying. And it is the idea that this society has gotten to the point where it can't defend itself. And, I don't believe in using like guns and stuff like that. That's not me. But the idea of not being able to defend yourself at all is pretty terrifying. And all these people just sitting there not knowing what to do. Ooh, it's freaky. It's freaky, right? Oh my God. And then like the old lady and the old man getting beat up, like they didn't ask for that. Why? I feel like they intentionally bookended this episode set with the old couple getting beat up at the beginning and killed for their money and stuff. And then you bookend it with the old lady who's the robot woman who's like maybe the one in charge of it all. Man, last episode nobody commented about it and I'm sure why, but I was like, I wonder if that old lady is a cyborg like Senguji was, and everybody's like, don't want to say, but I'm like, really? Somebody in the Discord last week was trying to say that there was an added scene in, I want to say somebody in the Discord said it. It was either a Discord or a comment, and somebody was like, don't read it. But they were trying to say that there was an added scene in the extended edition that's not in the regular episodes. And I wondered, now that I've seen this episode set, I wonder if the additional scene that was added last week into the extended edition was of the old lady downloading the files and stuff which made her seem like a robot, right? That, I could see that's kind of like the show spoiling it itself. If that is the case and it wasn't in the original version, but they added it to the extended edition, I kind of wish they hadn't have done that because it is kind of like it's spoiling the reveal that she's the robot. But then on the other hand, I'm like, it's fine. It's not like the worst reveal ever, but I'm like, oh, okay. I guess they did it just as a bridge, but I'm curious if that was the added scene in the extended edition. If it is, there's nothing I can do about it now, but just creepy stuff. And the thing that's so sad about it is, like, there is this state of, like, the show is very dour and depressing, and then it shows the people in the classroom getting killed, the top honor students. And you kind of understand, like, I'm glad that Kogami says that the people in the helmets are victims, because he's like, they're just people who have been, like, shit on through the civil system, and this is their one chance of getting to do something. So yeah, it's going to mess with their minds, and it's going to make them do crazy stuff. But the thing that's so disturbing is, like, the honor students, the ones that don't die, the others start to fight back and kill the ones again and, like, turn into these, like, monsters. And it just shows so quickly how things can just twist like that, and how fast people can turn and become latent criminals when they're pushed up against a wall. And that's kind of what Shogo has been trying to do, but it's very disturbing. I was like, oh my God. Like, this first section of the episode is really hard to watch, especially when the people start turning and decide to kill the other guys. And, like, when the citizens start to fight back. And then they're like, oh, well, if you were just defending yourself, then nobody's going to get in trouble. And so they use that as an excuse to keep beating the shit out of them. And it's like, oh my God. Like, it's terrifying. Like, everything is just amok. Everything is like self-defense. Everything is just, it's gotten crazy. Should we do it with our own hands? Isn't that risky? It's better than doing nothing. Yeah, like, Shogo has already caused, like, irreversible damage. Like, regardless of what happens from here on in, like, the system has been messed up enough. Like, he's thrown enough sand into the gears that it's screwed everything up. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to go back to the way they were unless Robot Lady does some massive overhaul. Like, what kind of damage control can you do with this? Like, everything on the internet, all the misinformation. I don't know how they're going to handle this, right? I don't know. Now every time we go see Kagari, it's going to be freaking sad. No! So they basically say it's a riot. Meanwhile, and then the old lady calls all the personnel to the main building. I'm glad that the building that they are in is not the tower where all the stuff is going down. Because for a second, geography is my worst subject. So for a second, I thought the tower that they all came from is where all this was going down. But it's not. I'm glad Shion wasn't there because I was afraid of Shion getting hurt. She wasn't in the tower, so that's good. I can't believe we went back to the events of episode 1. And this is like episode 16? We still have 18, 19, 20. We still have 4 episodes left? What? I'm honestly baffled. I thought we weren't getting back to the events of episode 1 until the finale. But we're already here. So, and we already supposedly have Shogo, unless he manages to escape, and we see it next episode. But what is going on? Like, that is just blowing my mind. So meanwhile, just the audacity. The audacity. I love the idea that they are just having dinner. They're having their snacks. Also, want to point out, Cho is not a robot. We find out because he blows up. But Cho not eating anything and him getting Shogo the tea and the Madeleines is kind of funny. Like, he got him the food, but he didn't eat anything himself. Right? Isn't that great? And then when we see Cho and Shogo, when we see them in the little room facing the tower, what it reminded me of was like in Bungo Stray Dogs, there's a character named Fitzgerald, and he has tea in like this little room, and across from the way you can see like where his opponent's like tower is right next door, and it's like it's just right there in front of him and nobody knows. It feels very much parallel that moment from Bungo Stray Dogs. And so Cho's like, do you feel restless? And he's like, yes, this situation would make one feel uneasy. And he's like, what's awaiting us from here on out? Okay, I guess Cho got a little skeet. He got a little soda pop. That's good. Good for him. No Madeleines for him, though. He's like, what will happen to this town? He's like, oh, I like that ordinary side of yours. Okay, oh my God. Can we talk about Shogo? Because Shogo says he grew up in this town and he wants it back, right? And Cho's kind of nervous, like, well, what's going to happen? And I like that Shogo, he says he likes Cho's ordinary side. Like which no side piece for Cho now. If Cho was wanting anything out of Shogo, you should have gotten that taken care of a long time ago. But, So yeah, I just, yeah, he says, I like that ordinary side of yours. It's like, we're not plebeians worried about the city on the surface. He says, we're quite ordinary and essentially common. He's like, I like that ordinary side of you, but we're both ordinary and common. So he says. But then what got me? What did he say that got me? He's like, yes. He's like, I've never thought of myself an avaricious person or a greedy person. I guess I need to clarify. Is Shogo a greedy person? No, not necessarily. But when he says he's ordinary and common, I'm like, bitch, you ordered tea and Madeleines. That ain't ordinary. No. And you're sitting here quoting these obscure sci-fi novelists. Like, hell, you're ordinary and common. Okay. Sure, Jan. I was just like, wait, what? He's like, a world in which everyday things are done in an everyday way. It's just like that. That's all. He's like, that's all I want. He's like, I just want the world to be of equity. To be of equity and quote unquote normal. Which, you know what? I give Cho and Shogo this with their goals. The civil system is messed up. And there's a lot of problems with it. And I'm not sure I like it at all. But the way they are going about dismantling it leaves a lot to be desired. And he's like, we're quite ordinary and common. And we're starting a crime in a town that is not ordinary. And I like that moment where Shogo puts the Madeleine down in the tea and it just slowly soaks the tea in. Oh, that part is like, that always drives me crazy because I feel like if you take I love taking graham crackers and sticking them in coffee. Like, that's always my favorite, but there's a delicate art because if you stick the graham cracker down too long in the coffee, it just tears away and gets stuck in the coffee and then it gets gross. tea is a weird consistency, and I'm like, I just am imagining all those Madeline crumbs like at the bottom of the teacup, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. And he's like, how should I put it? This town is a parody of the novels I read in the past. I like that the show is like calling itself out for not being as on par as some older science fiction. Like it's a parody of it. I kind of like that self-referential humor. That's really good. So, okay. Shogo's Book Club. Shogo's Book Club. We need to talk about it. Shogo's Book Club. He talks about William Gibson, like the ones by William Gibson. So, William Gibson is the novelist mentioned here. And according to the old Wikipedia, he's a novelist that is still, he was born in 1948. He's still alive. He's 75 years old. And he's written tons of stories that, like the Sprawl trilogy. He's done a lot of steampunk and sci-fi stories like Neuromancer, Burning Chrome, Agency, Peripheral. He's done a lot of different things. But what's interesting is that he kind of became infamous for like his dive into counterculture. And apparently that after his mother died when he was 18, he left school without graduating and traveled to Canada to quote unquote avoid the Vietnam war draft. However, at his draft hearing, he honestly informed interviewers that his intention in life was to sample every narcotic substance in existence. And he also said, I did not evade the draft as they never bothered drafting me. And I'm like, oh. So he definitely is like a punk, like just like punk rock, like just movement of just against the system, counterculture. Like it just, there's a lot on him, and that kind of led to his writing of cyberpunk. So, which I think is interesting that a lot of the stories mentioned in this particular episode set are tied to like cyberpunk sci-fi because Cho is really heavily involved. So that kind of makes sense. Cho is our hacker. So it's almost like Shogo's trying to like connect with him on his own level. Like, what kind of stories would you be interested in, Cho? Oh, you're interested in all these sci-fi novels. Well, you're a hacker and you might be a robot. So that makes sense. Cool. I want to see when he blows up if he was a robot. I think it was just his eyes. I wish we'd had an explanation of his eyes. His eyes were so cool. They were like the red with the green, with the golden like bars in them. I'm like, I wanted to know more. Why didn't you tell me, series? But he's like, no, he's like, it's not as wild as what Gibson depicted. Are you sure you weren't talking about Philip K. Dick? Now, Philip K. Dick is a novelist that died in 1982. He was 53 years old. He was born in Chicago, Illinois, which is the state I'm from. And he was really responsible for some really popular mainstream sci-fi adaptations of his work. Like Blade Runner is an adaptation of his work. Films based off his work include Blade Runner, Total Recall, Screamers, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, the Radio Free Abelmuth, and also the show that came out a few years ago, or the TV series, The Man in High Castle, is based off of his novels. So yeah, and then he wrote the anthology series Electric Dreams, like what the sheep that dream what is it, like Android? What does he say here? I like that Cho says, I've never read Dick, and it's like, that can be missed. I'm sorry. My shiver brain, I was like, you've never read Dick, huh? Well, is that all you've done? I'm going to stop. I'm not even going to go there. We're going to stay out of the gutter today. Going to stay at, and he's like, do androids dream of electric sheep? Yes. I remember that one. I didn't know that was a Philip K. Dick story. I knew of it. It was of an old movie. Yes. And then I like the show goes like, oh, hey, by the way, whenever you get time, you know, if you're not dead after hacking the system controlling this entire establishment, you should just like do a movie book comparison of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? You can check it out. Should be really cool. Do a book report. If you're not dead by then. Oh my God. Also, Shogo was kind of weird in his dress this episode with I'm assuming it was intentionally like half tucked in, half tucked out, long sleeve blouse. It seems like it was intentional. Also him wearing white. It seems like, you know, him trying to make himself, I think of they're a South American painter, and they did this beautiful painting, and it was of this man being he was being had all these guns pointed at him, and he's just standing there holding his arms up like this, and he's wearing a white shirt. And in the painting, the background is this red clay, and all of the guns pointing at him are dark, and he just stands out with that white shirt, making him look all innocent. Shogo has that same white shirt on this episode, like it's trying to make him look innocent. And I'm like, dude, what? He's like, you should compare when you have time one day. And then he goes into again, I love that Shogo is such a posh bitch. Like just having the tea with his cookies. And then he talks about how he's like, oh, you like ebooks? He is literally that girl in college I knew that was just like, she only drank like black coffee and read books. And she was like, oh, electric technology. What? You don't understand the value of a quill and ink. And I'm like, I had a roommate in college that he wouldn't date a girl because she had an iPhone because he said she was too technologically advanced. And I'm like, okay. But this kind of feels like him in a little bit because he's just like, well, you have to have it. And granted, I like a print book. I do too. I just don't have enough room for all of them. But there is something about, he talks about the physical, like muscle memory and the stimulation of turning a page. You definitely do not get that from an ebook, honestly. I can read fan fiction on my phone. I can read like comics and graphic novels on a digital device. That's fine. But if I'm trying to read a book, I do kind of need a physical book. It is hard for me to read like an electronic book sometimes. I have to really make myself, so yay. But yeah, what the fudge? He's like, adjust. He's like, when I'm not feeling well, there are times I can't take in what I read, but it also depends on what I read. It's like mental tuning. Basically, Shogo's like, well, if I'm not feeling well, I can't read my philosophical inquiries, but, if I'm feeling kind of down, I can still get some smut in and it's fine. But yeah, I do like the discussion of mental tuning, of it's important when you tune. What's important when you tune is the feeling of the paper that you're touching with your fingers and the stimulation your brain receives when you turn the pages. So he's like, that's something that you artificially can't recreate in the same way. So I like the idea that Shogo is talking to Cho about how there needs to be some things that are organic in the world. You can't simulate and create artificial versions of everything. It doesn't work that way. There is some part of your being that fundamentally responds to a natural organic process. And so what he's saying is that if you have like this artificial system, like the Sybil system in place, even if it simulates an environment, it's not as good as the original. It's not as good as reality as it was before the Sybil system. So his whole analogy about the textiles of books, even though I joke about in the reaction, it is just a big roundabout way to say that the Sybil system is just artificial, and it's not, people who are living in the Sybil system are not experiencing life with as much quality as they should be. So if you think about it that way, then Shogo, he's just a freedom fighter. He should be the protagonist of the story. Except obviously he's not, because he's killing people and he's doing things in a very sinister way, right? But then, yeah, but Cho's saying, like, when I talk to you, it feels like I've been missing out on something all my life. And he's like, well, you're not reading too much into it. And then he's like, it's about time. I feel like Shogo enjoys the praise. He's similar to somebody from the series Monster, that just like he influences people and people can't help but be influenced by him. But he himself isn't satisfied and is still seeking like a cure for his, in Shogo's case, I don't know if this is true about the Monster character, but in Shogo's case, he says, as he says to Kogami, as he's about to kill him, that I was like, wait, what? No, hold on. We'll get to that scene. But where he's like, well, you cured my boredom for a while. Oh my God, what a psychopath. Which is Shogo a socio or psychopath? We did a little test on Light Yagami in Death Note if he was a sociopath or psychopath. The answer is yes. But it'd be curious if next episode I got stuff together and saw if Shogo is in fact a psycho or sociopath. So when we got the crew together here, I think it is well worth the note. And I don't know where my dog's toy has vamooshed to. There it is. I think it's well worth the note of how many people are actually in the CID. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's 18. There are 18 people in this public safety bureau. That's it for the whole city. 18. 19 if you include Robot Lady. So, that's a problem. There are 18 people in charge. The factory that they went to back like 4 episodes ago had more people than that. And they're supposed to maintain the peace? What? But a lot of that is the drones. A lot of that are the drones that are in use. And she even notes it. She's like, yeah, we could do the drones, but they're not really equipped to handle a situation like this. That's why you all are here. I'm like, there's not a lot of them at all. To like teams of 3. Like they had the bare bones in this whole like district area. They had like 2 hand grenades. So they had 6 grenades and then 3 stun batons. And that's what they were supposed to use to handle the situation. And what's interesting is the way that she organized it, the way that she set them out to go handle the riots was a very calculated, methodical means of, it felt like now in hindsight, it kind of feels like how a robot would distribute the things. Like, okay, we will take in groups of exactly 3. There's 18 of you, so we will distribute them into 6 teams of 3. Here's 2 grenades apiece. Here's your stun batons. Go to these districts, and it'll be fine. But, like, the thing of it is, that feels very clinical in a way because, and I didn't think about it during the reaction, but now I'm like, she left nobody there to protect the tower or herself, which I'm assuming she figured she didn't need anybody to protect her. She was going to go down there eventually and wreck shit. I'm like, oh God. But yeah, that just, a human, like a normal human would probably say, hey, somebody needs to stay back here at the tower in case something goes awry. Now I'm curious, since she wants Shogo alive, if they're going to like try to dissect his brain, what's she going to do with Shogo? Is Shogo going to like have to... Is she Milverton and Shogo's Moriarty? That's the question, right? So, hear me out. At this point, I think it would be a very cool twist if we're doing like the Sherlock and Moriarty business, because in Sherlock and Moriarty, or in Moriarty the Patriot, I'm going to spoil Moriarty the Patriot here in the next minute. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Moriarty the Patriot, skip ahead about 30 seconds. All right, starting right now. In the anime Moriarty the Patriot, as well as in other Sherlock stories, there is a third villain, or a second villain called Milverton. And in Moriarty the Patriot, the anime, Sherlock and Moriarty are fighting, but then Milverton comes in as like the other antagonist, and they have to take Milverton down because they're as much of a threat as Moriarty is in this situation. So I'm curious, into the spoilers, I'm curious if the old lady is going to come in and be like this other antagonist in the system. Because you're going to have Shogo being the antagonist, but now she's going to be one too, because she killed Kagari! Ah! We're going to go back to that, but damn it! Damn it! She's like, we've had peace for too long. I want to know more about these other people in the CID, like the girl with the asymmetrical haircut, the blonde girl that looks like Hitch from Attack on Titan. I want to know who they are. What are they doing? I guess, you know, Shon's not there, so she would have been the 19th person, but, which is fascinating to me that she wasn't called there, so that's interesting. It's like, so that's how we're going to handle the situation. Yeah, I'm going to say Shon isn't there. That's fascinating to me. They called everyone there, but she doesn't get to come? Curious. Interesting. She's like, we have no choice but to have you guys keep us safe. And so, yeah, it's a very... I like that Masaoka sits up and is like, well, how many do we get? And she's like, you get 2 grenades. And Kagari's like, huh. Which, damn it, he's dead. No! Hate. So, yeah. She's like, it'll be time-consuming and dangerous. We don't have any other choice. The town's future is at stake. And I'm counting on you. It's interesting that Kogami is the last one to kind of look at her and stare at her. Like I don't know if he's trying to figure her out or anything like that, or if it's just coincidence, but it's interesting. So anyway, Cho and these random guys show up. And at first, when they confronted them on the stairwell, I thought maybe the guys that they hired to help out were ones that were like the 1 in a million, the ones who also had the crime coefficient that was low. But no, Kogami, like, I get so used to thinking Kogami is, like, foolproof in his deductions that I'm glad, for the sake of the story, that they show that, no, Kogami can be wrong, but it sucks that he was wrong, and he was like, shit, no, wait, Shogo is the one that's copied in the helmet, so of course we can't use our dominators. I'm like, I was glad it proved that Kogami isn't, like, invincible, but what a way to find out, right? And so Shogo gets them all together and shows them what they have. And he's like, this is the town I was born and raised in, and it's a pressing problem. And these guys want to see what lies beyond the destruction that you'll cause. And Shogo's like, what lies beyond the destruction, huh? That's interesting to me because, yeah, Cho's perspective is that he likes living there. He's from the outside. And those other guys want to see what will happen after he's wrecked the city. And Shogo's kind of like, oh, you mean the aftermath? Like, are we going to be able to see that? He says, if there's something beyond it, that's good. And if there isn't, I'll accept it. So he's like, I guess Shogo's like, well, if stuff ends up, if I get to see what happens beyond us destroying the civil system, great. But if not, at least I got to destroy it. Like, I feel like Shogo thinks this is a suicide mission. He's hopeful that they'll live, but he thinks it's a suicide mission. But we'll just see how it goes. And then what does he say there? They all get suited up. And he says, how's the information manipulation going? He's like, oh yeah, the AI setup is already at work. So, in any case, Kogami believes that it is Mikishima in charge of the helmets. He's right, of course. And, Kagari going with them. I'm going to feel so sad now, damn it! But yeah, they figure out that, you know, Kogami explains why it's Shogo doing it. And then Akane, I like that the moment that Kagari kind of looks between Akane and Kogami, he kind of looks between them like, are you two like, you're finishing each other's sandwiches? Is this a thing? I feel like that, no, the moment people start suggesting that Akane and Kogami are going together, they're gonna die. So that won't work now. No, don't jinx people. Kagari knew too much. He knew too much about Akane and Kogami, and he knew too much about the civil system. That's why he had to be killed. No! I also like the idea that Kogami and Akane, they both, one thing I really like about their dynamic is that at no point does Kogami, like, he doesn't talk down to Akane and treat her like she's insignificant or lesser than him. I'm watching another series right now, and it involves like an older male character and a younger female character. And I've been saying in the reactions, I'm like, it feels like he's mansplaining to her. And if you don't know what that is, it is when a male character in a series and in real life talks down to a female character as if she doesn't understand and he has to explain things to her for it to make sense, rather than just telling her like a normal human being. There's a tone of condescension, and it's hard to describe if you're not a woman and you've not heard it, but I've been mansplained before too, like, little lady, do you not understand how the world works? Let this man tell you how it is. And it's just like, I just want to like erupt. I just want to like dissolve into a puddle. But in this other series I'm watching, there is an older male character, and he constantly is onto the female character about being like, well, back in my day, like this generation, and you're just young and you don't know any better, and you're new on the job and you haven't figured things out, and once you've been around the block a few times, you'll understand what it's like, and all that jazz, and it's very annoying. I am very glad that Kogami's character is not like that. Even Masayoka's character is not like that. Like, Masayoka's character, by all means, should be the one, if anybody was going to do it, to do that to Akane. But they don't. They treat her like a professional and like an adult. And they trust her. They don't talk down to her. And I like that Kogami, even when, you know, at first, when I like the Kagari's like, go run him over. And she's like, no. But I like that even when they fire the grenade, Kogami's like, okay, now you can talk to them again. Try it again. It's okay. And she's like, all right. And he does it in a way that it doesn't come across as condescending. It's like they work together really, really well. And I absolutely love that about this series. I was a little bit afraid Kogami was going to die this episode. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But I'm glad that in their scenario, I'm glad we get to see both sides of the situation. Like for Kogami and Akane's group, they got it settled real quick, real fast. They were just like, they fired the one stun grenade. The others that saw everybody get stunned is like, oh shit, that's about to happen to us. And the bluff worked. They were able to use the bluff and it worked. Which there's a massive amount of people there. If they really wanted to cause a riot, they could. But it's that fear. It's that fear that they could get hurt. That they're like, never mind, I don't want to even try. I don't want to do something if I know I'm on the losing end. Now, I do like that we get in comparison, we see Ganoza's group, and their group seemed to be struggling. Like it was a much more violent riot, and Masaoka and them were having to push them back, and there were trash cans and fires and stuff like that. This was a lot more controlled, which lucky them, because that's when they figure out that the tower is not being watched. And I do like this little note that Kogami says where he's like, look, the people here that are citizens, they're not the only victims here. The people wearing the helmets, they're the type of people who couldn't do crimes on their own without the helmets. But now that they've done them, they're going to get targeted and the civilians are going to kill them. And he's like, as an enforcer, you know, it's not that he's feeling pity on them, but he's like, you know, he kind of understands what they're going to be up against. It's like... Like, I do love getting Kagari and Kogami's perspective about all this in this episode. It makes for a really, really compelling, like, look into, you know, and I think that kind of influences a little bit with what Akane does, because it's like one of those things where she realizes with Shogo, she's like, if I kill him, is he a victim? Is he a victim too? And also, Ganoza said not to kill him. So when Kogami said to, she's like, look, you're not the boss of me. And plus, Kogami was influenced by Sasayama being killed, and she's like, nope. I like her sparing Shogo. If anything, it shows how her and Kogami are different. She hasn't fallen into that hole that Kogami has. Now, whether it all comes to backfire on her and everybody later on, I don't know. But her not killing him, because I thought she was going to. I really thought she was going to kill him. And I was like, and we were about to have like a 7 situation. But no, she chose not to, and to not become like Kogami. Which is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how Kogami reacts to that later on. And if he gets onto her about it, it's going to be interesting. So, and that's when they figure out the tower is not occupied. And so Cho goes on this big spiel about the grid and about the idea that something is going on that's different. He's like, all of this is going through this system. It's passed from one place to another. So he's like, if a standalone system that no one knows about is hidden there, then that one machine is managing all of Sybil's processing and computing. I like that Shogo, who doesn't, you know, quite read as a big tech guru, is just sitting there like quietly listening. But also he's taking in all this information so that, you know, if Cho somehow dies, Shogo still has the information. Right? He still has access to it. So it's like, what do we do? And so he's like, a throughput that is not possible with existing technology. So something's up with the Sybil system. It makes no sense to put it all in one place to start with. No, it does not. And he's like, when you think about the security risk, it's too risky no matter how you look at it. And he's like, what if they want to keep it a secret even if they have to take a risk for it? I think Shogo kind of gets to the point of it. He's like, maybe it's a secret and it's in a risky place because they have no other choice. I feel like the Sybil system is going to be the big mystery from here on out of the season. And so that it's at this facility. And they're like, it's inside the building, either at the top or the bottom. Meanwhile, Akane tries to get hold of Ganoza and say that everything's decoys. And Ganoza's just like, don't leave your post. Everything's shit over here. And Akane's like, well, you know as well as I do that the security at the tower is just barely existent, right? We need to go back. Okay. And then, of course, Shogo's like, Kogami's gonna come for me. It's in our sights. I like the nod of Kogami with his eyes on the tower. And then Shogo walking and smiling. Now that's where the episode technically ends halfway. And instead we get Kagari. We get the little backstory on him. Which, here's the thing. At first, I thought that the entirety of this second half, I thought it was going to do exactly what it did back in episodes 11 and 12, where episode 11, Shogo killed the friend, and then we have Kunozuka's backstory. I thought it was going to do that, just do it with Kagari. And I was like, okay, we got an episode about Kagari. That's cool. We'll just do like lead up to the big dramatic conclusion. We'll do an episode of exposition, and then we'll lead into the rest of the season. But the moment we found out that Kagari's little part there was just like a little tiny mini flashback, I was like, are we setting him up to die? And they are! Damn it! I was like, no! I didn't get good vibes at all. But I feel so bad for Kagari. He was like, I was 5 years old when I was declared a latent criminal. And honestly, Kagari was like the least violent of all of them. When he was 5, he's like, it's a memory I want to forget. The heartbreaking look my parents had is still burned into my mind. And so he's like, I was confined to a facility after that. And like clockwork, every day I received therapy, counseling, and a stress care drug treatment. Like, they gave him some food and medicine and kept him there. Like, since he was 5 years old. But it's like, on the one hand, I'm all for, like, someone that has committed a crime getting rehabilitation and counseling. Absolutely. But in a reality situation, that rehabilitation and counseling is under the guise that you eventually will leave that facility and go back into society in the workplace. But here, that's not a possibility. They just keep you there under the guise that you're getting better and nothing ever changes. And we find out that he became the replacement for, he became on the force once Sasayama died. Mm-hmm. So, but just the idea but he was like in his late teens, early 20s when that happened. So his entire life, he grew up in that room. That's terrifying, right? That's why he knows so much about video games and stuff, I'm sure, because that's all he could do. That's so sad. And it's just the idea that he's like, and I like the way this episode phrases it. He's like, he's like, the idea of protecting healthy citizens, like that's such a hypocrisy. It's such like bullshit, because he's like, why should I have to protect people when the system is the reason I was here to begin with? But I like that he says, I like being a hunting dog. He's like, that's kind of the freedom that I get. Because when you think about it, it's the world Shogo's growing up in, the world Shogo's talking about is like the freedom to do whatever you want. The enforcers are kind of like, they are restricted by the system in a lot of ways, but then they're also freed within the system compared to other people too. So it's kind of a weird setup. So yeah, he's like, I'm working for somebody, but I get to like fight criminals. I get to, do what I want. I get to sit in this room and hang out and do whatever I please in here. I get to hang out with other people and come in contact with other people. And he's like, compared to being in that cell in that facility, it's the difference between heaven and hell. And Kunozuka thinks the same thing too. So it's like, yeah, that all makes a difference. But I like that Kagari's like, I'm not doing this job because I care about the people I'm supposed to be protecting. I'm not a shield for the citizens. I'm a hunting dog. I'm like, yes. That's so good. I love that so much. He's like, even though I don't have much freedom compared to the isolation facility, it's the difference between heaven and hell. And I like that at this point, Kogumi's like, are you okay? Are you scared? When he said that, I was like, death flag number one, besides sudden backstory, was when Kogumi's like, are you okay? We're going into this dangerous situation. Are you going to be on your game? And he's like, sure, of course I am. And I'm like, just feel like being a hot dog. Just sitting here waddling back and forth like, damn it. And the moment he smiled at the camera, I'm like, no. Hate. That big ass cheesy grin. I'm like, no, damn it. I don't want Kagari to be gone. Anyway, so there's 2 spots in the top floor and the others in the basement. We assume the top floor is where the old lady was. Which one has what we're looking for? The radio tower or the boiler room? So it's like, yeah, so Cho decides to go to the basement. And what's interesting is that there's supposedly 90 floors. He's like, we can't go the floor below. It shows down to basement level 4. But the blueprints listed the basement having 20 floors. Oh my god. So yeah, so oh my god. So basically Kagari had to descend down like 16 extra flights and fight those guys and slowly make his way to Cho, only to have them all be like just to be murdered. Oh my god. By the old lady. So yeah, and then they detect that there is somebody on the way. And of course Shogo's like, it's Shinya Kogami. That's not surprising. Of course he's figured me out. He's come to make out with me. I mean, fight me. I can't say that I love that as he's saying that, he wistfully goes to the window to Shogo to look out of it. But here's the thing. I can't support, I know you all are expecting me to ship Kogami and Shogo. I know you are. I almost kind of think that Cho and Shogo could have become a ship if Cho hadn't died. I think that Cho might have wanted them to become a ship, but the moment that Shogo was like gonna get out the Sweeney Todd knife and was gonna like kill Kogami, I was like, I can't ship that. The moment you start trying to kill someone else for realsies, nope, I don't know if I can ship that. So Akane and Kogami, my heart, I'm shipping them 100%, but Shogo and Kogami, it's like a toxic ship, so if that's your thing, sure. And I like that Kogami the whole time is gritting his teeth because he understands, like Shogo said later, that going after Shogo is a diversion. That Kagari going after Cho in the basement is the real objective. But the sad thing is that Kogami he can't let that grudge go. He has to go after Shogo, even though he knows he's a distraction. That's the sad thing. I'm glad that Kogami and Akane didn't go to the damn basement, though, because old lady, if she'd shown up and killed them too. Oh, damn. But yeah, he's like, I'm going to create a diversion. And so then, yeah, I like that Shion is asked to help out, and she helps out. And what I love about Shion's character is that she is very sassy, very no nonsense, but at the same time, she's also very concerned. Like, she gets really concerned for Kagari when he disappears and she can't contact him. She's gonna feel bad when he dies because she, like, was the last person to talk to him. That's so sad. I want to hear what his last words to her were. But then, like, Kagari, he's like a dog, like, that's been let loose. He's just, like, so ready to go find Shogo. And I like the idea that Shion, she asks Akane for permission to use, like, backdoor tech to get information. She's like, I could use this backdoor, like, hacking thing, but if I get in trouble for it, I don't know. And Akane's like, it's all my responsibility. And she's like, recorded that, putting it down. I like that Shion has that little trace of, yeah, I'm a latent criminal, so yeah, if I have to throw you under the bus, I totally will. And I love that. But also, I feel like Akane, I was worried when she said she was going to take full responsibility. But I'm like, girl, you be careful because Kagari's dead now and you didn't kill Shogo. So is that going to backfire on you later? I don't know. But they end up going through the tower to try to figure out. I like that we cut back and Masaoka and the others have got everybody, like, they've got everybody wrangled up and Ganoza's just sitting there being like, okay, fine. He's like, they broke into the tower, so we have to go after them. So they're on their way. And they're going to, like, they're on their way, but they're not going to make it in time to save Kagari. And Kogami is like, well, nothing really. And I wondered what that was. Yeah. He's like, we need to interrogate him. So arrest him. Make sure that he comes back alive. And Kagami's like, I'll try. And he's like, trying's not good enough. We need the results. I wonder if Kagami realized that there was a ulterior motive to keeping Shogo alive. Because so far, Gino hasn't, like, been explicit like that about the latent criminals. Obviously you want to try to paralyze them, but to this extent, they should just kill him and get him over with. So the fact that Gino's like, no, I want you guys to take him alive, I think Kagami's realizing that there's something going on that Gino's not telling them. And he's trying to piece it together, but he doesn't want to say anything yet to the others, which we'll see. But yeah, they're told to take him alive. And that's when Kagari decides to go. He decides to go on his own to face them in the boiler room. I like when she detects that it's Shogo at the top floor. The little thing pops up that says, the same person! It's not like identity matched or like identity verified. It's just like the same person. Hilarious. Love it. So they're like, Shogo's on the top floor. Why not the government office floor? They went straight to the antenna, trying to hijack the radio signal, or so they think. And so Kogami's like, well, it's a distraction to keep us away from basement floor. And so Kagari thinks he's going. He's like, I'll go. And Akane's like, it's going to be 1 versus 4. And he's like, well, it'll be 2 versus 4 for you guys. So wouldn't it be more dangerous upstairs? Turns out, no. And then when they set up, he says, okay. And that's when Kogami tells him, he says, don't act reckless. And he says, I don't want you to tell me that, Ko. No, I hate it because that's the last time he's going to talk to him. So I like this idea. I just love the idea of Kogami and Akane like going through the elevator, going through all the motions and everything. Like I said, I hardcore ship Akane and Kogami, but what I like about them is that they are both professionals and they just like, they both work really well together. And I like that they both have so much trust in one another. Like when Akane gets shot in the leg, she's like doing the tourniquet and she's like, go on up ahead. She's like, you can have it. Trust me, I'll catch up. I love that faith that she has in him. And he has faith in her that she'll be okay. Because, you know, like in other series, he'd like throw her over his shoulder and be like, you can't be left to take care of yourself, little lady. I'm going to take you with me. No, he lets her take care of herself. And she ends up saving him. So it's like, love it. But then we find out that there's multiple floors that go beyond the 4th floor. And he sees the little light there. And he's like, Professor. Now he says Professor. The basement's only supposed to have 4 floors. So Shion was a teacher before this? I'm curious to know Shion's backstory now. Just hopefully not to where she dies. And he says, I don't like this. This isn't for me. Oh, I really don't like this. And then when he steps in there, that's when it goes off. His last words to her could have been, I really don't like this. Oh my God, I hate it. So yeah, they get in the elevator. And they get in the elevator to go up to see Mikishima. And he's like, we can't use the grenades near the tower antenna or Gino will kill them. Which is funny. And she's like, how are you going to deal with the helmets the enemies are wearing? And that's when he brings up the idea of using the helmet on her. So that it can bypass. And so her coefficient won't be the one used. But then we find out that it was Shogo's. So, sucks. What's interesting here is that... well, that's why. So I was trying to be like, why couldn't Kagari use the Dominators in the basement? Because there's nobody to block out the crime coefficient. That's because the communication link blocks the Dominators. I was like, so they covered their bases. They basically made it to where anybody going either way was going to be at a disadvantage. With Shogo, because there's not something scrambling the communications, Shogo is the one to knock out and make the helmets usable. And in the basement, he didn't go in the basement because there's already a network thing blocking out communication down there. Son of a bitch. How dare. So yeah, and then man, just the idea of them using these weapons, like when the Dominators are useless, like getting him with the nail gun. The moment Kagari got hit with the nail gun, I was like, that sucks. And then Kagari only having a nail gun to use against all these others. And Cho had a weapon down there. I like that we see Cho trying to use all these fake passwords to try to crack the lock and just keep running until he does it. Which he finally cracked the lock. But his whole conversation with Kagari being like, now that you have your freedom. And for a second, it's like Cho was trying to lure Kagari to help him, being like, look, you know, once we crack the Sybil system and ruin it, you'll have your freedom. Isn't that what you want? And I like that Kagari's like, look, I hate this system. I hate what I'm stuck with, but it's what I'm stuck with. And what you guys are doing is no better. So screw you all. I like that Kagari stood by his principles. I love that he did that. I was like, good. don't, like, follow along with these people. Ugh. And then Cho says, I'm just like a rat. I live by sneaking and hiding. And you're a disposable hunting dog who has a collar put on. I thought that maybe Kagari was going to, like, go along with it for a little bit to, like, get near him and, like, get close enough to him to, like, then double cross him. But that's not Kagari's personality. Kagari's like, screw you. I'm going to turn the tables and get rid of you. You slimy bastard. You guys are cracked too, just like Sybil. Who do you think you are? Manipulating others and talking about letting them live or killing them. He's like, if Sybil's God, are you trying to be the devil? Don't make me laugh. Oh, I love it. He's like, you and I are trash who just envy the happiness that others have. I don't care if thousands of citizens in this damn town are gonna die. But I don't like the fact that you're the only the guys who are making them kill each other are the ones who live carefree. I'm like, oh, Kagari gets to make it like his last stand. Oh, I love it. And he's like, Enforcer, how many times will you have to die? And he's like, well, if there's a hell the first time I die, then I'm sure Yama will tell me. I'm like, Kagari just doesn't care. Oh. And so then it's a race against time to try to beat Cho to the basement. So then we're back to the top. We're back to the rooftop where all this took place. I'm so baffled because I did not think that we would be here. I didn't think we'd be here already. But we are, right? That Mikishima's there. And he's like, I was careless. And I like that Kogami gets onto himself because it got Akane shot in the leg. But girl already made a tourniquet. She's going to be fine. And she tells him to go. She's like, don't let Mikishima get away. That's an order. And I love that he's just like, yes, ma'am. He just nods at her like, okay. I love that she's like, I'm not a damsel in distress. Go do the damn thing. I'll catch up. We stand ourselves a power girl like Akane. And Kogami's like, okay. So yeah. And then we have him fighting. I wish he'd taken like the lightsaber saw from that one guy. That seemed like it would have been a better weapon, but I don't think the fight between him and Shogo was 100% equal, on equal ground. Because, yeah, Shogo definitely has, if not moves to match Kogami, he knows enough martial arts moves to maybe beat Kogami. But Kogami had been shot. He'd been slashed. He was, like, bleeding everywhere. He just had surgery a little while back. Like, Kogami was in a worse off place. And I think Shogo completely took advantage of that. I also like the Fibonacci spiral of the staircase going up. And then Shogo comes down like a Disney princess. And he's like, oh my God, Kogami, you beat all the people to get me and come rescue me from the tower. Right? My knight in shining armor. And we cut back to the first time they met. And like Kogami's like, the fudge? Again, the Sherlock and Moriarty parallels here from Moriarty the Patriot are pretty funny. And then the crime coefficient is 0, which is terrifying. So then Shogo says that justice is subject to dispute. We have the quotes from the two guys, and they just have their book club circle. I feel like Shogo's giving Kogami a formal invitation to the book club this episode. But it says here, justice is subject to dispute. Meaning that we can argue what the right path of justice is based on our own thoughts, experience, culture, whatever. But might is recognized and not disputed. Because might is something that's more concrete, being like, oh, well, if you're strong, you're strong. But justice is a more abstract concept, right? So we cannot give might to justice. So we can't equate the two. Or because otherwise, what would we do? And I like that he just walks down the stairs quoting this to him. And then Kogami's like, sorry, but I have long since learned as a measure of elementary hygiene to be on guard when someone quotes Pascal. Oh my God. And he's like, oh, it's Ortega, right? I knew you'd say that. So Ortega and Pascal. What we got here? We got There's a philosophy forum, a doubt about Ortega and Pascal. Basically, it's an unpublished remark. I'm trying to find something about it's a Nietzschean summary of Pascal's wager. Okay. So he says, Ortega is a dead man. We can never know without asking the man himself. I'm trying to find what this whole thing with Ortega and Pascal is. But what is this? I want to find this out. Philosophy. Here we go. Okay. Oh my gosh. And some of this is in Spanish. So what is happening? But okay, so basically Ortega gained notoriety in early 1902 when he published his first article, Glow Sauce. But I'm assuming he had a debate with this person, Pascal. I'm trying to find here as his prestige grew. Something here. Ortega having all of this presence. I don't know exactly. I'm going to do some research. So don't tell me yet, but I'm going to do some research about Ortega and Pascal for episode 9. So I don't want to be sitting here looking up too much on it, but I'm going to look up some Ortega and Pascal information for episode 9 and see what I find. If you quoted Pascal, I would have said the same words right back to you. He's like, us agreeing on something isn't making me happy. I like that Kogumi's like, I really don't want to be in a ship with you, so please back off. You and your high waters. Like, what is this? And he's like, it seems it'd be fun to talk the night away with you, but I am busy with other business right now. See, I like that. I think Shogo would be up for the relationship, but Kogumi's like, no, thank you. He's like, I'm going to kill you right here and right now. And he's like, I can't believe those words came from a detective. And I want Kogami to be like, I'm not a detective. I'm an enforcer. He's like, there isn't a string puller behind you. It's just you in charge. He's like, we can take time and investigate the truth of the case after you're dead. And he's like, oh, well, when I met you in the past, you were dying, so I could have finished you off then. He's like, I like that he just kind of glares at him. He like squints his eyes at Kogami, and he's like, I could have killed you back then. Shouldn't you like thank me for saving you? And Kogami's like, no. I love that Kogami's like, screw you. No, I'm not going to thank you. Get out of here. You're going to regret saving me. And then they have this big fight scene. And I love that Shogo like tries to tempt him. He's like, don't you want to know the truth about the Sybil system? And Kogami's like, I don't care. Oh, but he's pretty dangerous. Shogo is a good fighter, knows his martial arts, and he does get the upper hand on Kogami, which is terrifying. And he's like enjoying it. Like Shogo is enjoying beating the snot out of Kogami. Right? Like he gets a rise from it. And he's like, I thought this would end in a less disappointing manner. But for the first time in a long time, I was able to forget my boredom. I'm like, the thing that's so crazy to me is I thought that Shogo would want to keep Kogami around to be the Sherlock to his Moriarty, but it doesn't seem like he cares. It seems like he's perfectly fine with just getting rid of Kogami and moving on to the next. Like, well, you didn't exactly live up to my standards, so... Because from the beginning and throughout this whole series, you think, oh, well, Kogami is exactly what Shogo's been looking for in a rival and a partner, but no! He's like, nope, I like it because it's not treating it like the novella, like Sherlock and Moriarty, in a sense. It very much ties to Shogo being like, this place is a parody of the books I've written, so here's my realistic answer. I'm not just going to keep you around so you can try to like solve the riddles and stuff. He's like, no, I'm going to get rid of you and move on to the next person, and maybe I won't be bored. My thing is, I wonder if he's going to now find Akane interesting now that she's proven that she's capable of knocking him out. I don't know if he's going to find her interesting more so than Kogami. I don't know. But he was all set to like kill him. And that's when Kogami notices and she just knocks the snot out of him with that helmet. Yep. Which, that helmet, spare no expense. made with the best of materials, spared no expense. And then he says to kill him. He's like, Inspector, kill him. But she can't do it. Even when she thinks that she should, maybe. She can't do it. And then she's just like, nope, you are under arrest. Ugh. Now I hope that she gets to actually arrest him. They don't show us. Instead, they show the other two guys that look like they were killed. And they had like a gun, a baton, and like a gun there too. And there's all this blood dripping and more nail guns. And then poor Kagari, he like is limping down there. Like his leg's been hit, his arm's been hit, his other arm's been hit. Now the question is, what the hell is he seeing? Because he gets in there and Cho is like taking a video of it. And he's like, what the hell is this? And he's like, this is the true form of the civil system. And Kagari's like, what the fudge? He's like, we don't even have to destroy it. If we make this public, it's the end of this country. And this time, real riots will occur. So Kagari like looks around like, what the fudge? So we don't get to see what it is. There's like something yellow in front of them. And he's like, no one will be able to stop him. And then, of course, the old lady's gun works even when there's no signal. So I'm like, what is this business? Like, we don't get to see what it is. And she's like, the enforcement mode is a lethal eliminator. And then she points the gun at him. And that's when he goes and shoots the air gun. Of course, it hits her. Now, she hit him straight in the head. And he exploded. So I guess he wasn't a robot. But, oh my God, yeah, it corroded her. Uh-huh. It corroded part of her body. But she's the Sybil system. Oh my God. And Kagari's like, the fudge? Because, yeah, what does it show? It shows, yeah, part of her eye and everything. Yep, she's the robot. And he's like, you are. Ah! And it says it's a non-lethal paralyzer is what the mode is. And it says aim calmly, but then nope. It turns into something else. And she's just smiling at him. Oh my God. Holy shit. And he's like, give me a break. This bites. Oh, damn it. And he just smiled there right at the end. Right at the end, he smiled. Son of a bitch. And that's the end of the episode. So, what's up with the Sybil system? What's the secret? What's in the little bubble? What's there that is going to bring the country to its collapse if we find out about it? Why Kagari couldn't even be spared? He'd seen too much. You can't go down to the basement and see what's down there, because otherwise you got to die. So, the question's going to be, how is she going to explain Kagari being dead? Like, how is she going to justify his death? But if they see that the Dominator is what killed him and Cho, and Shion is like, but the Dominators didn't work down there, but then how did they know, right? So the chief could say, oh no, they worked down there, and it was a malfunction. Or, I mean, Cho's death can be explained by saying the Dominators worked, but how are you going to explain Kagari's death? What the fudge? I can't believe he's dead. At least he died smiling, but that sucks. Damn it. He's not the first person I thought would die in this show. He's not the first person I thought was going to be Masaoka for sure. Ah! I'm going to look up a little bit about Pascal and Ortega for episode 9. I'm going to look up some stuff on that, so stay tuned for that. But I want to know if they ended up being able to... The fact that we didn't get to see her handcuff Shogo makes me extremely nervous. He's going to get away next episode somehow. I don't know how. I don't know in what way, but I'm so curious what's going to happen next. So Y'all, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait for the comments, but if I don't, then I'll at least get to the comments for episode 10. So we'll see. But in any case, I'm excited to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Psycho-Pass.